Thank you. We now welcome Manuela Ramos and Nancy Kavira. Manuela Ramos is a young development advocate with expertise in communication of human rights and migration issues. She has a master's degree background of information and data science and communication studies at Roskilde University in Denmark, and also a bachelor's degree in journalism at the University of Zaragoza. Together with Nancy, she completed a qualitative fieldwork and a policy analysis on access to livelihoods for refugees in Kenya as part of her master's thesis. She's currently holding a position as assistant editor of Weibo magazine at World Intellectual Property Organizations in Geneva, Switzerland. And Nancy Kavira Njoka is a young human rights lawyer and an international development professional with focus and interest in communication for development, forced displacement, and migration. She holds a master's degree of science in international development studies and communications, also from Roskilde University in Denmark, and also a Bachelor of Law from the University of Nairobi in Kenya. Currently, she is working in project management for the Danish Arab Partnership Program, supporting civic engagement and political participation among the youths in the Middle East and North African region. Now, they are presenting a paper called Contributions of Female Refugees to Livelihoods in Urban Displacement in Nairobi, Kenya. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Lisa. And thank you so much for inviting us over here to present this idea of the research, which is inspired by our master thesis, where we conducted a fieldwork study, qualitative study in Kenya, investigating access to livelihoods for Somali urban refugees living in the country. And it's very interesting to see the background of this RAISD project, which is very similar to what we did. We were investigating how refugees are able to access or create avenues to access livelihoods in a vulnerable context, both politically, culturally, but also socially. In most conflicts, women are usually categorized as vulnerable groups, and that's important actually. However, the vulnerability of women, it follows them in countries of resettlement and has been used to negate their agency and, most importantly, their roles in rebuilding livelihoods and reestablishing themselves. Our study and this research is looking at the agency of Somali women, and especially Somali refugee women in Nairobi, where they have indeed taken the role to be actors in the context that does not include them in any way, and they're nowhere to be found in the actor mapping of the refugee program in the country. Actors can advocate for protection of women refugees while simultaneously engaging in efforts to dismantle harmful images of victimized refugee women.
We would like to show you a video to introduce our previous project. That it's the projects that brought the idea of focusing on Somali refugee women and the vulnerability of Somali refugee women. So just giving you a bit of context with the video.
Nairobi is a central mixed migration area in East Africa. There is an estimate of 82,000 refugees that live in urban areas. Some of the groups constituting the urban refugees include the Congolese, South Sudanese, Ethiopians, Eritreans, Burundians, Rwandese, and the Somali people. The Somalis make the majority of refugees that live in the urban areas of Nairobi. They reside in Eastleigh, which is colloquially referred to as the Little Mogadishu. Nevertheless, it's a well-known commercial area for having the Somali community running businesses, health facilities, and informal jobs. They live and work side by side with Kenyans and the Kenyan Somalis in the neighborhood. Despite the economic independence of the Somalis in Nairobi, they live largely without material assistance or legal protection from the government of Kenya and the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. When it comes to livelihoods, in Nairobi, the urban refugees are divided by well-established social networks that often provide them opportunities for housing, community integration, and informal employment. The urban refugees group in Nairobi experience various obstacles that stem from the tight encampment policy. Some of the challenges include difficulty getting work permits, lack of skill recognition, and access to formal financial services. They have been assimilated into the CESIE business hub, where they are found running roadside hawking businesses and also working for the Kenyan Somali business owners.
Our research wants to take a closer look at Somali refugee women who also contribute to create livelihoods in CESIE. Building on recent studies on gender and migration that emphasize the agency of urban refugees, the project wants to understand the role of women and understand their experiences by investigating their own actions towards creating avenues to access livelihoods with their social, economic, gender, and policy context in which they forge livelihoods. The overall objective of the research will be to influence policymaking in Kenya by equating the refugee law framework to the reality of women urban migration, which is overlooked in the country and globally.
Thank you. Thank you. We can go back to the slide.
Okay. Without knowing about the methodology that Noelia explained at the beginning, actually for our research project, we map all the interconnections and all the relations of the actors that we found on this on the Somali urban refugees and that influence how they forge livelihoods, and we map all the political level, the humanitarian level or meso level, and the community level. And we realized that we didn't see where was the realm of action of Somali refugee women. There was an absence, silence, there was not enough difference between Somali urban refugee and the women, and that's what triggered the project, to beat that gap. And let's gonna see the scope of the research.
On the scope of our research, you might wonder why we are focusing on the protracted migration in Kenya. Before the migration crisis in the European Union, Kenya and Africa has been experiencing migration crisis since 1991 after the civil war in Somalia, where we've been hosting over 1 million refugees, and have actually managed to live quite peacefully with the population until the ones that managed to leave the camp. And that's why this group, which is almost a forgotten case, is of interest for our research. And why the Somali community? Well, we like to securitize and stigmatize and victimize refugees and people seeking asylum. The Somali refugees in Kenya have come together and built one of the biggest business hubs in Eastern Central Africa. CESIE is a city within a city, and it's a very special space in the country. And this shows that when people are given space and agency, they can actually build themselves and livelihoods within the societies they integrate within, rather than assimilating them. And why women refugees? Women refugees have not been researched a lot in East Africa. And more so, during our field work, it was interesting that all the interviews we conducted were actually male participants. And it's not that we did not try to reach out to the women, but we couldn't find any community leader that was female, even though in CESIE and in those malls, most of the businesses are actually owned and run by women and women refugees. So it was an interesting observation, but also due to limitation of time, then we couldn't take a further research in understanding why the women were not there. And And this paper will take like a feminist approach, and we look at 4 themes: the mobility patterns from the camps to urban centers. Refugee matters are managed by the encampment policy in Kenya. So the refugees are supposed to remain in 2 of the biggest refugee camps, the Kakuma and Dadaab. Most of the Somali refugees, you find them in the Dadaab camp, but they also are built in really workable social structures, and they live in tribes. So that always gives them avenues to leave the camp and move to the city, where they establish businesses and just continue living dignified lives like everyone else wants to live, right? And with the Somali ethnicity, they make up the largest number of the refugees in Africa, but also in Kenya because of the geographical position of both countries. And while citizenship in Kenya, up until now, I am Kenyan, we do not have any legal or law that actually grants any legal residence or citizenship to people seeking asylum in the country. However, there have been a little bit loopholes where they're able to apply for work permits and other ways to work around the mechanisms of exclusion created by the government and the actors. The livelihoods is the overall theme of our project, because until people are fed, they're not able to cater for themselves. But they have also found a way to work around that, to be able to provide for themselves, take their children to school, and actually run the households without so much protection, even though they need the protection.
How do Somali urban women refugee create their avenues for livelihoods? To answer these questions, the project is designed as a qualitative case study, and the pre-cal data is collected through fieldwork, not only on the fieldwork that we did in 2020, but future, hopefully. And we will base our research question, we will answer the research questions based on literature on gender, migration, and refugee agency that are, and how they create the access to livelihoods, trying to realize about the dichotomy with this victimhood and agency that we frequently find. Also, we will pay attention to policy frameworks and actions from the Kenyan governments that are currently there trying to change with the Refugee Bill 2019, but it's not really changing anything, and it's something currently events to take into account. Obviously, it wouldn't be me, who I'm not even Kenyan, I don't speak the language, it wouldn't be me who run the interviews, but we wanted to have a team with using participatory approaches, and people like Giovanni and so on running the interviews, building the trusts with women, other feminist Somali women that we know in the country, to collect the data and to make to bring this gap, right, and to recognize them, because obviously our basket of privileges are very different compared to and that can bias the knowledge and the data that we collect.
And for further research, we will be looking at the mobility patterns and why women move from the camps to the urban areas. Would be accessing the challenges that the Somali refugee women face during the mobility, and but also in resettling in the host countries. We intend to still focus on Somali refugee women, but also look at other contexts of the refugees living within the city, and the conditions in which they're able to build these businesses and actually be very successful that the rest of the world could borrow from, especially where I'm coming from, Denmark. Thank you.
Thank you.